Hello there, good evening, and welcome to another edition of Ed Live. Of course, this program is dedicated to protecting our democracy. Most of you know what has been happening in our country over the past few months. Matter of fact, from since 2015. However, things took the worst turn on December 21st when the government was defeated by no confidence motion. We all know as of September 18, Guyana has an unconstitutional government, some usurpers in office, and of course, every week we try to keep you updated as to what is happening, what are the new developments. I have with me in studio a brother, a friend, and of course a comrade, Nigel Dharamlall.
Yeah, thank
Nigel,
you.
welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I think this is your debut on this program.
On this program.
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening to our viewers as well, and we welcome you.
Yes, certainly. Nigel, over the past 24 hours or so, we had some developments at GCOM, which we want to address. I know there are some efforts to remedy that, I don't know how to put it, but that act by some persons in the GCOM Secretariat, and also we had the unconstitutional president, the usurper, announcing a date. And let me just say, announcing a date. He has not done what is required by law to ensure that the March 2, 2020 date for general and regional elections is actually the cemented date, if you want to call it that, the confirmed date. So, Nigel, your first time on this particular program with me, I'm going to give you a chance to maybe make some opening comments with regards to what has been happening in recent months.
Yeah, well, I think we have experienced some very treacherous times in our country over the last 8 going on to 9 months, specific to the behavior of Mr. Granger and elements of his coalition. I think that it has now become legendary that the modus operandi of the regime is one that is authoritarian, one that is dictatorial, to the extent that they have now driven us, our country, into a constitutional crisis where elections ought to have been held since March 21, on or before, and because of the court matters, they took a pause, and since the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice, definitive orders requiring the president, no less a person than the president, to call elections within a 3-month period as defined by the Constitution of our country. And he has refused to do so. That time elapsed since September 18. So we're at a period now where Mr. Granger, he has usurped public office, the office of the president. He is now occupying office illegally, and so too the rest of his cabinet, quote unquote. And so what we have now, he has since, because of international pressure, and I think more so because of local pressure from the People's Progressive Party Civic, as well as a wide gamut of organizations and individuals who believe in freedom and democracy, they have put pressure on Mr. Granger. He has buckled. He has indicated that March 2nd is a definitive date. The Constitution, and it is funny that Mr. Granger always speaks about respecting the rule of law and respecting the Constitution, but nothing that he does is in service of the Constitution. Him naming a date or nominating a date as March 2nd, the Constitution requires the President to name a date by proclamation. Article 61 of the Constitution allows that, or requires that. But Mr. Granger has indicated a date. He has not proclaimed a date. And he can proclaim a date long before the dissolution of Parliament. The Constitution requires that 3 months before the proclaimed date, that the Parliament has to be dissolved. He has not done either. So I recall in when President Ramatar was president, he had prorogued the Parliament, and then he dissolved it So in that 6-month period, I think in January of 2015, he proclaimed a date, and then he dissolved the parliament in February of 2015. In January, he proclaimed May 11th, and in February, he dissolved the parliament. So there, Mr. Granger has to do what the Constitution requires, and he has been dodging the rule of law, and he has been dodging the requirements of the Constitution all across these past few weeks. And then, of course, we now have the famous order that GCOM issued yesterday.
But before we move to that order, I want us to spend some more time on what Mr. Granger did when he announced or he mentioned. I think that is what it boils down to.
Yeah.
He mentioned, first he said March 2nd is the earliest possible date for general elections. It simply means, in what he was saying there, is that elections could be held anytime after March 2nd. Subsequently, as a result of pressure again, within 24 hours, or less than 24 hours, Mr. Granger came out and said March 2nd is a definitive date. He was trying something to say that he is going to, he's saying that that's the date, but he's waiting on the PPP to return to Parliament, to extend the life of his government. He tried to use all sorts of tactics to try to get the PPP back to the National Assembly. I know you will speak to that. The leader of the opposition and the leaders within the PPP would have been talking repeatedly about this issue. But the point, I think, and this is something that I think we need to let the Guyanese people know, Mr. Ramutar, I think it's on the 21st of February, issued a proclamation or proclaimed that the National Assembly will be dissolved. And the date that he set for the dissolution of the National Assembly was the 24th of February. Now you might say it's just 4 days. The issue here, or the point here, is that a proclamation to dissolve Parliament and name a date for elections can be dated. Once Parliament is dissolved, elections must be held within 3 months, and by the 4th month, the new Parliament must meet. So Mr. Granger, because we can't trust what Mr. Granger says. Mr. Granger said on the evening, the morning of December 22nd, that he will respect the no confidence motion. And we saw what happened. Mr. Granger said that a few days after, when they started with the whole court proceedings, that he will respect the ruling of the court. But he appealed, and when it reached to the CCJ, he said prior to that he's going to respect the ruling of the CCJ and comply with that ruling. 3 months have elapsed. We're in the 4th month since the CCJ ruled and issued those consequential orders, and Mr. Granger is still to comply. So we can't trust Mr. Granger. We can't trust anybody in the coalition. So what he can do, let's say December 2nd, from December 2nd to March 2nd, that would be 3 months. Mr. Granger tonight, tomorrow morning, can issue a proclamation to say Parliament will be dissolved on December 2nd. The fact of the matter is, once he issued that proclamation and is gazetted, then we know for a fact that the date is definite. So he don't need to wait until the 2nd of December to issue to proclaim. He can proclaim now, right? And these are, and I had to verify this because I listened to what he was saying. I did some research and I realized he can make a proclamation now and say Parliament is dissolved in 2025. There is no time bound.
Actually, some countries, the US for example, they have a specific date on which elections are held. You know, so there's no negotiation about that. Everyone knows that on X date are the elections.
I think it's November, sometime in November,
yeah,
4th or 7th or something like that.
So, and it is important that you raise the issue of trust, because long before, he's saying that he will accept the decision of the Parliament, which is that the no confidence motion was validly passed. Mr. Granger campaigned on promises. And over the 3.5 years leading up during his government to the no confidence motion, he has broken practically every single promise that he has made to the Guyanese people on the issue of employment, on the issue of support for young people, on the issue of dealing with corruption, on the issue of galvanizing and growing our economy. Those things he on the rule of law.
The energy sector,
I
blackout. I mean, that's a famous
right.
one.
The increasing public servants' salary, increasing sugar workers' salary by 20%. So he has steadfastly and consistently broken the promises that he made prior to the 2015 elections. So I think he has a history of being untrustworthy. And so his claims after the vote of no confidence passed, I don't think anyone really took him seriously. And up till now, I don't think anyone has taken him seriously until he is going to abide by the Constitution, until he's going to obey the Constitution, until he's going to respect the Constitution, and until he's going to be patriotic to the values of this country. Only then people will be able to take Mr. Granger seriously. And as how I see it, until we have elections, only then we will genuinely know when elections will be.
Exactly, and I agree with you, because, I mean, don't put it past him coming up with some, I don't know how to describe
well, actually,
excuse.
I think he's trying everything to remain in office despite being there illegally. But the rest of the world is against Mr. Granger illegally occupying office. They have basically said so unequivocally. The American government had said so. The British government, the European countries. Today, the OAS issued a statement.
The Commonwealth.
The Bar Association, I mean, they gave him a stinging rebuke a few days ago. The CIOG did, the MYO, the Dharmic Sabha, the Christian community did. So everyone right now is against Mr. Granger illegally occupying office. What we require is some level of decency, even a modicum of decency on the part of Mr. Granger to, one, proclaim the date for elections, and let us quickly move towards elections.
And I think it's replicated across Mr. Granger, his gang that he has around him. Even those who are now occupying or posing to be ministers are they have the same traits. There's a gentleman who parades himself as the ribbon cutter, the Prime Minister. Sorry. The Prime Minister.
Rubber stamp, I usually say.
He cuts ribbons all over the place. I think that's his legacy when he comes out of office. Would have been, I saw him on, I think it's the state radio, trying to explain to this nation why the Mr. Granger can't proclaim now. And I think sometimes I wonder if these
Granger
guys are
doesn't
lawyers.
understand the Constitution, much less Nagamoto. Nagamoto is, as some of our leaders have said, he's a bicycle bell lawyer. He rings a bell and goes around.
Yeah, your bicycle bell gets stolen,
and you go to
hire him to go and defend you and so on.
Exactly. So no one takes him seriously. I think what he owes this nation is why he has been diluted and denuded of responsibilities as a prime minister. I think that is what he owes this nation. He owes the nation an explanation, because many people actually voted in support of his being in office. But I think moving forward, though, elections will happen, and whether Mr. Granger likes it or not, I think this country is moving in a direction where everyone requires elections. I think the entire private sector, for example, everyone that we speak to on a daily basis, everyone that you interface with, whether at their business place or whether in some other environment, they complain about what is happening in our country as a result of Mr. Granger refusing to name or to proclaim a date for elections in our country and move quickly to have elections in place. There's great fear, I think, in Granger moving to free and fair elections, and it is more than likely that Mr. Granger will be out of office very soon.
I think they realize the writing is on the wall with regards to the future of, well, the PNC,
Well,
APNU. I don't really want to say the AFC because I think that they've died a long time ago.
yeah, and I think no less a person than the knowledgeable quote unquote Freddy Kissoon said, I think they probably will muster less than a few votes.
Yeah.
But going back to this issue of the PNC, the Karen Cummings went to Brooklyn, had a diaspora meeting a few days ago, and I think on Thursday, and said that there are internal and external forces working against his government. The only force that is working against his government, or Mr. Granger and his illegitimacy, is the free will of the people of Guyana. That is what is working against Mr. Granger.
I think what is working against Mr. Granger as well is Mr. Granger. By failing to adhere to the Constitution, by breaking the promises you made to the people in 2015, 2014, by raising your minister's salary, some of them 100%, and said there is, as Harmon said,
Apology.
there is no apology.
Right.
There is no apology, and the excuse about this to ensure that there is no corruption. But guess what? The level of corruption in this government is unbelievable. So I think Mr.
Yeah.
Granger is working against himself.
Well, at that time he was a minister. One of them ended up in one of the popular entertainment establishments with $18 million in a bag one night. And then I was reading about a month ago or 3 weeks ago, that same person with $5 million stolen from their vehicle. I mean, I think these things need to be investigated. I mean, where these guys acquired so much money so quickly, and I heard, they are buying up real estate and living lavishly over the last few years, but especially now, over the last few months, they are acquiring real estate like mad.
But they need to know that the gravy train is going to come to a halt, because I don't think the people of this country would want to deal with the APNU, AFC, well, I should say the APNU or the PNC again, especially the younger people. And I think that is one of the things that the younger people in 2015 never had the experience of the PNC. So all they knew was the PPP. Now, there is something to compare. So the lies that they sold to the people about how corrupt the PPP was, and the lies that they sold to the people about how they're going to increase and better their living standards and all of that, now people would have seen the real PNC and what the PNC stands for. That is to really enrich themselves, and they care nothing about the people.
And I think too, there is a great deal of incompetence in the way they conduct public business and in the way they have managed or mismanaged the economy so far. Every single thing in our country has deteriorated. Every single aspect of our economy has deteriorated. And I think that Mr. Granger, no less a person than Mr. Granger, will have to be held accountable for all of the travesties that have taken place over the last 4 years of his regime. And the reason why the People's Progressive Party Civic, we have said unequivocally that we will not return to Parliament to extend and to give legitimacy to the illegalities of Granger and his regime.
I want to move to the other issue I want to move to here, Nigel, is what has been happening at GCOM. Because I think while the pressure has been on Granger to ensure that he comply with the Constitution, both as Karen Cummings put it, the internal and external forces would have been pressuring Granger and his cabal to ensure that the Constitution is respected and elections are held. There seems to be a deliberate effort by elements in GCOM to somehow put a spoke in the wheel, so to speak, with regards to the preparations for elections. And I know you wanted to speak about that famous order that was issued. I'm going to give you a chance to start that.
Well, that's fine. Thank you. Well, even let us backtrack a little. The Constitution gives adequate time for GCOM to prepare for elections. As a matter of fact, as a constitutional body, independent so, GCOM is always supposed to be in a state of readiness for elections. That is their primary purpose, to conduct elections. So that is why the Constitution gives a time period, especially in the outside of a normal cycle of government, a 3-month period, or at any time the president decides to dissolve the parliament and call elections. 3 months. So they're always supposed to be at a state of readiness. Since last year, GCOM ought to have had elections, prepare for elections by on or before March 21, 2019. And as the goalposts keep shifting due to dubious reasons and challenges brought to court by the Granger regime, GCOM also, whilst the timetable is moving backwards, they are supposed to also be shifting that 3-month period. So they're never supposed to be ever beyond a 3-month period. So they have deliberately, and I think Mr. Lowenfield, as the chief elections officer, must be held accountable for the incompetence that is currently taking place and that has taken place at GCOM over the last 10 months. Mr. Lowenfield has to be held accountable for it. And a few of the other senior officers who are the ones who give instructions to staff to get things done. So they must be held accountable. And I think that in addition to their incompetence, the fact that they are unable to, after so many years and billions of dollars, they are still unable to be in a state of readiness for elections. They owe this nation some level of response in terms of why they are not, or they've never been able to be ready during the course of the period of this regime. And so I think that and our party is firm on its view too, that there is a high degree of incompetence led by Keith Lowenfield. And there is a possibility too that when you analyze what is taking place in GCOM, that there is a strong collaboration between the high management of GCOM and the People's National Congress, of which Mr. Granger is the leader, and PNC being the lead party in the coalition. So every single utterance of the PNC is basically validated by actions of the high-level team at GCOM. So, and we feel that there is a conspiracy also taking place between the high management of GCOM and the PNC. And that also brings for the whole issue of, again, trust. And we require people who we can trust to conduct free and fair elections in our country. And our party is going to be pushing, as we have been pushing. Our leader has been pushing as well. Our presidential candidate has been doing so. Our executive secretary, who is the chief scrutineer of the party. Our commissioners as well at GCOM, they've done a fantastic job all together. And we will be pushing for international observers, for them to get here in adequate time and to not to just visit polling stations, but to be working in polling stations to ensure that we have free and fair elections in Guyana. We will also be requiring additional support in GCOM, international support, independent support, so that elections can be free, fair, and credible.
And because I want to run through quickly what GCOM did, where the Secretariat did, where the commissioners would have agreed that the claims and objections will be 35 days.
Correct.
So the Secretariat, which is basically administrative arm of GCOM, was tasked with preparing the order, which will be gazetted to say the claims and objections will run from the 1st of October to the 4th of November. However, when the order was gazetted, we realized that the period was extended to 49 days. I think it's another 18 days or so, 14 days added. So, and that is something that the Commission didn't agree to. The Commission agreed to 35 days. Where exactly the other 14 days came from is still a mystery. That is one part. The other part is GCOM issued a press release where, and I think this was yesterday, where they said that every single Guyanese eligible voter must visit a GCOM registration office during the claims and objections. And Nigel, we can go back to the Chief Justice ruling on this matter. And we can go back to elections after election, where you would recognize that during claims and objections, the only people who are required to visit the GCOM office are persons who are not yet registered and are 18 or will be 18 years by the qualifying date. Persons who would have moved from one area to another and who want to make a change with their address. Persons who would have married or for whatever reason, a deed poll or so, to change their name, want to make that adjustment on their ID card. Those are and of course, persons who would have died or so, you want to remove their names when you make an objection. Those are basically the functions or the activities during the claims and objections. But GCOM now, because of pressure from the PPP, and they had to shift and had to cancel the house-to-house registration exercise, the Secretariat and elements in the Secretariat are now trying to find ways in which they can remove people from the list, because persons who are overseas, maybe in vacation, who are in the interior during this claims and objections period, if they don't visit the GCOM office to confirm their identity, to confirm that their credentials, whatever information is there at GCOM for them, is accurate, then they will be removed from the list. So that too, Nigel, is another conspiracy.
Yeah, naturally, and I think everyone can see it. But we are very clear. As long as you're 18 years old and you're on the list, you're eligible to vote. The Constitution allows that. The Chief Justice ruled to that effect in her ruling recently. On the issue of residency, as long as you're 18, you can visit within your area a GCOM office, as you said, and get registered or get your transactions done as required. During a claims and objections period, there is no reason, absolutely no reason, for any single person who is already registered, and that is an established fact. If you're already registered, there is no reason for you to go and verify your registration. You're already registered. The claims and objections is for people who have not yet registered, for them to go and get registered, and for those who require transactions in terms of changes or modifications to their particulars. That is what happens. And then during the objections period, that those names that ought not to be on the list, that those names can be contested during the objections period. You're correct that our commissioners and the Commission of GCOM, as they have indicated to us, and they have publicly said that 35 days were the number of days that they had agreed for the claims and objections period. The order came out 49 days. So there is something, as you said, there has to be a conspiracy between the high levels of GCOM and the regime, Mr. Granger's regime, to again create conditions around the voters list, and especially during this period. They have been unable, they lost out on the residency issue and during the house-to-house that they were conducting. And they also lost out on people having to, those already registered, to deregister and then re-register. They lost lost out on that as well. So they have created some new conditions to create confusion. But we have said, and our commissioners have publicly said yesterday afternoon as well, that 35 days is what they had agreed, and they had brought this to the attention of the chairperson of GCOM, Madam Claudette Singh, and I think there is confirmation that that order will be changed, and we do hope too that those who conspired will face the consequences of their incompetence.
And I want to make this point, Nigel, with regards to the claims and objections. And I'm looking at and this can be found on GCOM's website. It's the notes for the guidance of registration officers and staff when revising the preliminary list of electors. And under the heading of revision of list of electors, 5.1 speaks to claims and objections. And this is what it says. It says the claims and objections exercised within the continuous registration process will be conducted at the registration offices and sub-offices for a specified period of time. And that's the 35 days to which we speak. This is the important part that you must listen to. The exercise provides eligible electors who did not register. The exercise provides eligible electors, persons who are 18 years and above, who did not register, the opportunity to gain entry to the list of electors or to update their particulars in cases of transfers or changes. It also provides the opportunity for objections to particulars in the preliminary list of electors. The claims and objections exercise will be conducted consequent on the publication of the PLE at the registrations offices and sub-offices. So GCOM itself, and this is not something that they developed yesterday, this is something that they have been using, where they are guiding the registration officers how they need to operate, what are the activities that need to take place within the claims and objections period. And it's pellucid to say that eligible electors who have not yet registered. It says nothing about people who are registered having to go and verify their information. This, what GCOM Secretariat, the elements they are trying, is a mirror of the house-to-house registration exercise, where they raise the issue of residency, wanting persons to confirm, or you have to be in Guyana in order to be on the list. So these are all attempts, and I think it's not so much attempts to delay the elections, but these are attempts to contaminate and to tamper with the list of electors, to tamper with the NRR so that they can produce a flawed list of electors, and then we have all sorts of confusion and questions about the credibility of the elections.
But in addition to that too, I think that the fact that the high levels of GCOM, the Secretariat, that they are going to this extent to surreptitiously change decisions of the Commission and to insert them into orders in keeping with the fancies of Granger and his regime. I think it is ominous that when they may have reviewed already the numbers on the list, they probably know already that the PNC will lose the next elections. So they are trying every single thing, as you said, to get favor in the way of the PNC. And this new verification / validation that we must go to a GCOM center to verify and to validate our status, it is unconstitutional, it is illegal, it is also counterproductive to the claims and objections period that has been outlined so far. It is not going to add value. As a matter of fact, as you said, it will create confusion, and it will also get people off of the list if they're actually going to use that as one of the yardsticks. That is unconstitutional again, unless of course they probably want some additional court matters slamming them. But I think by and large, we know of the land that was given to Lowenfield just a few days before or after the June when the definitive orders of the CCJ. So that is when that guy was supposed to have been fired and stuff. So we know the collusion between the state, the illegal government, and Mr. Lowenfield. So he will try every single thing to stymie progress in free and fair elections.
And I think the other issue is, Nigel, is that the efforts by Vincent Alexander and the other, I don't want to say government, the PNC nominated commissioners, to somehow illegally remove eligible voters from the NRR. I think that it wasn't just the voters list. It was trying to create a new NRR, National Register of Registrants, where persons who were on vacation, who would have migrated, who were in the interior, if they weren't home to be registered, they would be taken off. Those efforts were thwarted when the house-to-house registration had to be truncated. It had to be cut, it stopped. So they realized they couldn't get the names probably of persons who they want to put, who should not, or who are not eligible to be on the list. Those efforts were stymied. So the next best thing to do now is to try to remove.
Yes, they're trying to surreptitiously remove people off of the list, and they have also given that additional, or taken that additional 2 weeks or 14 days to the commission's 35 days claims and objections period. That will also give additional time for them to get those fake names onto
the list.
Onto the list.
So clearly, we can see what is happening at the level of GCOM. Well, at the level of the secretariat, and not every single person in that secretariat. I think there are elements.
The high levels. There are one or two people, and I think that Lowenfield has to be one of them because he is the CEO, and naturally, also I shudder to think that the PRO is not involved, because these releases come from the office of the PRO. So naturally, too, the PRO would be involved, possibly the deputy chief elections officer as well.
Because you're seeing a lot of the releases are conflicting to what actually would have been coming out of the commission.
But these people have to be held accountable. If they are breaking the law, they will have to be held accountable, and we cannot continue to allow a handful of people to dictate the how things are done.
I think we're almost out of time, Nigel. I see the operator showing me 1 more minute. So I'm going to give you a chance, though, to wrap things up within that minute.
Yeah, well, I'd like to encourage all those who have to conduct transactions during the claims and objections period that you get to your nearest GCOM center and get your transactions done. I think that is critical. We have to vote out Granger and his regime. We have to vote against their incompetence, against their corruption, against the mismanagement of the economy, against the discrimination of poor people in our country. So I would like to emphasize and re-emphasize the importance of ensuring during this claims and objections period to get your transactions done.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And this is where we're going to wrap things up. We're going to be back next week. Nigel, probably you need to come back. We need to talk more about this, and what has been happening. So until next week, I want to thank you very much for being part of the program. Of course, we're going to continue to keep you updated as to what is happening in our country and the developments. Of course, as you're aware, the pressure has been mounting on the unconstitutional government to act and to ensure that constitutional rule is returned to Guyana. Until next week, bye for now.